The story opens in the frozen wilderness of America during the peak of winter. The entire landscape is buried under thick snow. A young woman is desperately running across the icy terrain. She's exhausted, struggling to breathe, and terrified. For a brief moment, she thinks about stopping, but fear forces her to keep moving. The next day, we're introduced to Corey Lambert, a skilled wildlife tracker and hunter. While patrolling the mountains, he spots a pack of wolves. With a perfectly aimed shot, he takes down one wolf, sending the rest of the pack fleeing into the wilderness. Corey had promised to spend the day with his son, Casey. As soon as he calls him, Casey appears fully geared up with his rifle slung over his shoulder. Together, they drive to Casey's grandparents' ranch. Corey asks his son to wait there while he checks something nearby. Corey is actually there for work. His father-in-law had reported that a calf had disappeared, raising concerns that a mountain lion might be hunting livestock in the area. Corey begins tracking the predator, but instead of finding cougar tracks, he notices something unusual: human footprints. As he follows the trail, he spots drops of blood scattered across the snow. Realizing something is seriously wrong, he pulls on protective gear, draws his pistol, and cautiously follows the tracks. These are the same footprints left by the young woman who was running earlier. At first, the footprints are clear, but after a while they become uneven, as if she was barely able to stay on her feet. Corey continues following the blood trail until he finally discovers the young woman lying motionless in the snow. She is barefoot, frozen, and covered in ice, with blood around her mouth. He immediately calls emergency services. Since the roads are buried under snow, it will take the FBI several hours to reach the remote location. Tribal Police Chief Ben instructs everyone not to disturb the scene until federal investigators arrive. But Corey knows every passing minute matters. The snowfall is getting heavier, and he warns Ben that the fresh snow could erase the tracks, destroying valuable evidence about where the victim came from and what happened. He asks for permission to investigate on his own, but Ben refuses. Corey quietly tells Ben that he recognizes the victim. He believes she's Natalie, a local girl. Ben insists they'll wait for an official identification before confirming anything. A short while later, an FBI vehicle arrives. Behind the wheel is Jane Banner, a young FBI agent who has been sent to handle the case alone. She's clearly unprepared for the brutal weather, wearing light clothing that won't last long in the freezing temperatures. She explains that she was reassigned straight from training. Her arrival surprises everyone. Ben finds it unusual that an FBI agent has been sent alone in a rental vehicle to such a remote location. Casey's grandmother lends Jane some warm clothes. They once belonged to her granddaughter, and although she isn't happy about giving them away, she knows Jane needs them. When Jane steps outside wearing the clothes, Corey freezes for a moment. The sight brings back painful memories of his own daughter. By now, it's clear that she is no longer alive, although the reason behind her death remains a mystery. After asking Casey to stay with his grandparents for a few hours, Corey heads back to the crime scene with Jane. The snowstorm has eased, making it possible to examine the area more carefully. Chief Ben arrives shortly afterward, and the tribal police have already secured the scene. Even though the storm has temporarily stopped, everyone knows it could return at any moment. Corey continues insisting that the victim is Natalie, while Jane begins examining the body. After a closer inspection, she says the forensic team needs to process the scene immediately. Corey explains that Natalie's family lives nearby, yet no one has reported her missing. One detail doesn't make sense to anyone. If she grew up in this harsh environment, why would she be running through the snow barefoot? Jane asks Corey what he thinks happened. After carefully studying the tracks, Corey concludes that Natalie had been running through the snow for a long time. Eventually, exhaustion overtook her, causing her to collapse. The freezing air severely damaged her lungs, leading to a fatal pulmonary hemorrhage. Recognizing Corey's tracking skills, Jane asks if he'd be willing to assist with the investigation. Corey agrees, saying that tracking people isn't much different from tracking animals. Later that night, Corey is seen preparing ammunition when Casey approaches him. After hearing about Natalie, Casey quietly asks, "Is it happening again?" Corey doesn't answer. The next day, Jane learns why Natalie was never reported missing. After turning 18, she had moved out of her parents' home to live with her boyfriend. Meanwhile, the medical examiner reveals disturbing findings. Natalie had been sexually assaulted before her death, although it's impossible to determine whether there was one attacker or several. Her body also bears multiple injuries, turning the case into far more than a tragic accident. The medical examiner confirmed exactly what Corey had suspected. The cause of death was pulmonary hemorrhage, triggered by prolonged exposure to the freezing cold. However, the autopsy also revealed evidence that Natalie had been sexually assaulted before she died. With these findings, the case was officially ruled a homicide. Now the biggest question remained: where had Natalie been running from? The problem was, there were almost no leads. Frustrated, Jane admitted that if she sent such a weak report to her superiors, they'd likely pull her off the case, meaning the investigation would lose federal support. With time running out, the team immediately began interviewing anyone connected to Natalie. Their first stop was her parents' house. Natalie's father was clearly exhausted and irritated irritated by Jane's questions. He explained that after turning 18, Natalie had moved in with her boyfriend and rarely shared details about her personal life. In fact, she had never even introduced her boyfriend to the family, leaving them with almost no information. Meanwhile, Natalie's mother remained alone in the bedroom, silently grieving. Ben quietly signaled Jane not to disturb her, but Jane stepped inside anyway. She found a broken woman sitting motionless, her back hunched over, unable to do anything except cry. A few moments later, Corey arrived. The moment Natalie's father saw him, his anger disappeared. The two men embraced without saying much. They had both experienced the unbearable pain of losing a daughter, and words simply weren't necessary. Corey gently told him that after losing his own daughter, he had learned one painful lesson. Sometimes holding on to the pain feels easier, but eventually you have to remember the love they gave you, not just the grief they left behind. After collecting himself, Natalie's father revealed one possible lead. He admitted that his son, Chip, had gotten involved with drugs and often spent time with a local gang known as the Little Feather Boys. Despite all his problems, Natalie deeply cared about her brother, so if anyone knew something about her recent life, it was probably him. Without wasting any time, Ben, Jane, and Corey headed to the gang's property. As soon as they arrived, loud music echoed from inside the house. Ben warned Jane that 4 brothers lived there, and none of them were known for cooperating with the police. While Ben and Jane approached the front door, Corey quietly circled around the back. A young man named Sam answered the door. He appeared heavily under the influence of drugs. Speaking sluggishly, he claimed that one of his brothers was in jail and that Chip wasn't home. Then, without warning, Sam sprayed pepper spray directly into Ben and Jane's faces. Both officers were instantly blinded by the burning pain. Before Sam could do anything else, Corey rushed in from the side, grabbed a shovel, and slammed it into him, knocking him to the ground. Jane forced herself back to her feet and drew her pistol. Her eyes were still burning, making it difficult to see. As she cautiously entered the house, Sam suddenly opened fire. Jane immediately returned fire, shooting several rounds while taking cover. When the gunfire stopped, Sam collapsed onto the floor, coughing violently. Jane quickly kicked his weapon away and kept him at gunpoint until Ben entered the room. Seeing Sam's condition, Ben suggested they leave immediately. Jane wanted to call an ambulance, hoping he could still be saved, but within moments, Sam took his final breath. Outside, Frank and Chip had already been detained. Jane began questioning them, but the moment Chip learned that Natalie was dead, he completely broke down. Once he regained control, he revealed the first real breakthrough in the investigation. He knew exactly who Natalie's boyfriend was. Jane wanted Chip to take them straight to him, but Corey noticed something far more important. Fresh vehicle tracks had been left in the snow. Using binoculars, he carefully studied the trail. The tracks led toward the same mountain where Natalie's body had been discovered, but something didn't make sense. The vehicle had driven up the mountain, yet there were no tracks coming back down. Corey immediately realized this couldn't be a coincidence. He told Jane that the snow was still preserving Natalie's story, but they had to move fast. Another heavy snowstorm could erase every clue they had.
Following the tracks, the team drove as far as they could before Corey shut off the engine. Dense trees blocked the path ahead, forcing everyone to continue on foot. They didn't have to walk far. The tire tracks ended abruptly. Nearby, they discovered another body. It was partially buried beneath the snow, badly decomposed, with birds having scavenged parts of it. By evening, the entire area had been sealed off, with police officers searching for evidence. Ben ordered investigators to obtain surveillance footage from the facility where Natalie's boyfriend worked. Meanwhile, the suspects in custody refused to say a single word. Watching the interrogation stall, Corey asked Ben if he could speak with Chip alone. Ben reminded him that even if Chip confessed to him privately, it wouldn't be admissible in court without a law enforcement officer present. Still, Ben admitted that Corey might uncover information that formal questioning couldn't. While Jane stepped away to take a phone call, Corey approached Chip. Chip looked defeated. He muttered that this town was hopeless and that there was no future for anyone living there. Corey grabbed him by the shoulders and looked him straight in the eyes. "Your sister's killers are still out there, walking the same streets where you grew up. Are you really going to let them get away with it?" Without waiting for a response, Corey turned to leave. The guilt finally broke Chip. He confessed that Natalie's boyfriend was Matt, a security guard working at a nearby drilling site. Chip believed Matt might know what had happened, but if anyone knew the full story, it was Sam. The problem was, Sam was already dead. Corey returned to Ben and Jane. Although Jane was eager to know what Chip had revealed, she chose not to press him. Ben suggested they all head to the drilling site first thing in the morning. Corey simply walked away without giving a direct answer. Soon after, investigators identified the second body. It was Matt, the same security guard who worked at the drilling station. Later, Jane visited Corey's home to tell him the news. Corey invited her inside to escape the freezing cold. While he stepped away to get some water, Jane noticed several family photographs hanging on the wall. When Corey returned, he pointed to a young girl in one of the pictures. Her name was Emily, my daughter. Jane quietly offered her condolences. For the first time, Corey shared the tragedy that had changed his life forever. Years earlier, he had been working in another town. One weekend, he and his wife Wilma left for a short trip, leaving 16-year-old Emily at home with her younger brother Casey. That night, an unplanned party took place at their house. The following morning, Natalie called to say that Emily had disappeared. Days later, a rancher found Emily's body nearly 20 miles away from home. By then, wildlife had badly damaged the remains, leaving investigators with almost no forensic evidence. The case was never solved. Even after all these years, the pain was still visible on Corey's face. His voice trembled as he spoke. Jane realized she had unintentionally reopened an old wound. The next morning, Ben, Jane, and several uniformed officers headed to the drilling station. Corey took a different route on his snowmobile, following the tracks he had discovered earlier. Before entering the site, Jane briefed the officers. Their objective was simple: search Matt's trailer for anything that could connect him to Natalie's murder. Corey was asked to report any discoveries over the radio. Meanwhile, Corey continued tracking fresh prints through the snow. Following a trail of animal tracks, he eventually came across the carcass of a dead animal. At the drilling station, the security guards claimed they were about to report Matt missing themselves. According to them, Matt hadn't been seen for 2 or 3 days after arguing with his girlfriend. As Jane questioned them, she noticed that 2 of the guards had visible injuries. They brushed it off, saying the job was dangerous and the company failed to provide proper safety equipment. Eventually, the site supervisor gave permission to search Matt's trailer. Watching from a distance through binoculars, Corey realized the tracks he had been following passed directly beside the trailer where the officers were now investigating.
As Jane approached the trailer, one of the guards casually asked, "Did Natalie report Matt missing?" Jane replied, "Yes." Without thinking, the guard immediately responded, "So, you must have found Natalie's body." The atmosphere changed instantly. No one had publicly revealed that the victim was Natalie. Authorities had only announced that an unidentified young woman had been found. So how did this guard know? Ben's officers quietly spread out, taking tactical positions. At the same time, the guard reached for his weapon. Within seconds, the situation turned into a tense standoff. Trying to keep things under control, Jane identified herself as FBI and warned everyone to stay calm, making it clear that attempting to flee would only make things worse. At that exact moment, Corey tried calling Ben over the radio. No response. Realizing something was wrong, he grabbed his rifle and sprinted toward the trailers. As Jane moved closer, she learned that another security guard named Pete was asleep inside. He had just finished working the night shift. This is where the story flashes back to the night everything happened. Natalie had secretly gone to the drilling camp to surprise Matt. Matt was thrilled to see her. The two embraced and spent time together, talking about their future and where they hoped to build a life together. Then, voices echoed from outside. The other security guards had returned earlier than expected. While Natalie was getting dressed, Pete accidentally noticed her and immediately began making inappropriate comments. Matt stepped in, shoved Pete away, and closed the curtain. But the situation only escalated. Pete came back looking for a fight. Another guard insulted Natalie, and she slapped him across the face. Enraged, Pete grabbed at her clothing. Matt immediately attacked him. Within seconds, the other guards jumped in, overpowering Matt. One of them smashed a bottle over his head, knocking him unconscious. With Matt unable to defend her, the group turned their attention toward Natalie. A badly injured Matt eventually struggled back to his feet and tried to fight again, buying Natalie a few precious seconds. She escaped through the trailer door. As she ran into the freezing night, she looked back one last time. Matt was completely surrounded. Hearing his cries behind her, Natalie kept running into the endless snow, the same desperate escape that led to the opening scene of the film. Jane was still knocking on the trailer door, unaware that someone was waiting on the other side. Curtis stood outside, pretending he had no idea what was going on. Without warning, boom! A shotgun blast tore through the door and struck Jane, throwing her several feet backward. The ambush had begun. The guards immediately opened fire on the officers. Despite being seriously wounded, Jane stayed in the fight. Lying on the ground, she fired back and shot one of the attackers in the leg multiple times, killing him. Seconds later, automatic gunfire erupted from inside the trailer. Jane watched in horror as Chief Ben was fatally shot. Curtis was still alive. He rushed over, disarmed Jane, and prepared to kill her. Before he could pull the trigger, a single sniper round echoed across the snow. Curtis dropped instantly. It was Corey. From a distance, he picked off the remaining guards with deadly precision. Another attacker inside the
trailer was eliminated, leaving only one survivor, Pete. Pete smashed through a window and fled into the snowy forest. Jane fired at him from beneath the trailer, but he disappeared into the trees. Corey immediately reached Jane's side and carried her inside the trailer, placing her on a couch. Bleeding heavily, Jane handed him the radio. "Call for a helicopter. That's my only chance." Corey radioed for emergency evacuation. Then he looked toward the forest. "I'm going after Pete." Jane nodded. She knew exactly what Corey intended to do. Pete ran desperately through the wilderness. He was exhausted, gasping for air, but he kept pushing forward with his pistol in hand. What he didn't realize was that Corey had changed into a white camouflage suit. Against the endless snow, he was practically invisible. Without making a sound, Corey appeared behind Pete, struck him, and knocked him unconscious. When Pete finally woke up, he found himself inside a sleeping bag. His hands and feet were tied, and blood covered his face. Corey calmly explained that they were standing on one of the highest ridges in the area. Terrified, Pete said he wanted to talk. Corey quietly sat down on a nearby fallen tree. "Go ahead, I'm listening." As Pete slowly sat up, he glanced down and froze. His boots were gone. He was barefoot. Panic immediately took over. Corey stared at him in silence before saying, "Start talking. You don't have much time." Pete finally broke. He confessed that he had assaulted Natalie. He admitted that he had also killed Matt. Begging for mercy, Pete pleaded, "Please, take me to jail. I'll accept whatever punishment I deserve." Corey's expression never changed. "There is no law out here. There's only me." After hearing the confession, Corey took out a knife and cut the ropes binding Pete's hands and feet. Then he pointed toward the distant highway. "If you can make it there, you're free." That's the same chance Natalie had. She ran 6 miles across this frozen wilderness, barefoot, trying to escape people like you. Now it's your turn. Pete still couldn't believe what was happening. He assumed Corey would eventually arrest him. Instead, Corey fired a rifle shot inches away from Pete's ear. Startled by the deafening blast, Pete sprinted into the snow in blind panic. The mountain offered no mercy. Steep slopes, deep snow, freezing wind. He stumbled again and again, sometimes crawling on his hands just to keep moving. Far behind him, Corey simply watched. He never fired another shot. Eventually, Pete's lungs gave out. He collapsed onto the snow, struggling desperately to breathe. Within moments, he died the same way Natalie had. Corey never had to pull the trigger. Sometime later, Corey visited Jane in the hospital. She had survived. Although still weak, she was expected to make a full recovery. Trying to lighten the mood, Corey cracked a small joke and even brought her a stuffed toy, making Jane smile for the first time since the shooting. After a moment of silence, Jane quietly said the one thought she couldn't get out of her head. "I keep wondering, how did Natalie manage to run 6 miles barefoot through that freezing cold? What must she have gone through?" Corey looked at her and replied with just one sentence. "The people who chased her, I made them run too." Later, Corey visited Natalie's father and told him everything that had happened. Before leaving, he offered one final piece of advice. "Don't push your son away. Right now, he needs his family more than ever." With that, the story comes to an end.